In the news, King Abdullah speaks with Ghassan Sharbil of the London-based Al-Hayat newspaper about a host of challenges facing the Arab world, saying the Kuwait Arab Summit this week is timely to mobilize international cooperation. Israeli forces shoot dead 3 Palestinians in a raid on a home in Jenin to capture an allegedly wanted man, triggering demonstrations in Jerusalem and the West Bank. And the first OSCE monitors consisting of hundreds of personnel are due to arrive in Ukraine to support de-escalation efforts. Good evening and welcome to a new edition of the news. Here are the details. His Majesty the King presented his views on a host of regional issues in an interview with the London-based Al-Hayat newspaper conducted by its chief editor Ghassan Sharbil and published today. Amid various critical challenges facing the region and the world, His Majesty said the Arab Summit in Kuwait later this week is timely and should mobilize enhanced international cooperation. King Abdullah reiterated his position on the Palestinian-Israeli conflict being the longest lived in the region, saying that solving this conflict is a prerequisite to addressing several other challenges. His Majesty spoke about his recent talks in Washington with the U.S. President, where he stressed on Jordanian interest in final status issues, especially Jerusalem, refugees, borders, security, and water. In response to a question about an alternative homeland in Jordan, King Abdullah said this is an illusion promoted by Israeli hardliners who are bent on the possibility of depopulating Palestinian territories of its people and forcing them into Jordan, again stressing that these are mere illusions. On the Syria crisis, the king said he doubted the conflict would continue at this pace of violence for many more years, as this would slide the country further into a failed state scenario. He said all Arab countries, concerned neighbors, and the international community should exert sincere efforts to end the conflict, address the tragedy of Syrian refugees, and work towards a political solution that ensures the unity and sovereignty of Syria. His Majesty cautioned that a disintegrated Syria would result in unstable entities that constitute a security and humanitarian burden on Syria's neighbors and fuel dangerous separatist tendencies in the region. The king also acknowledged the delicate situation in Lebanon as it tries to prevent a spillover. The interview also tackled the reform process in Jordan and efforts to empower citizens to participate in the decision-making process. Our responsibility is to dedicate ourselves to the service of the people, defend our national security, and maintain our core values of unity, pluralism, openness, tolerance, and moderation, the king said. Thousands of Palestinians mourned the death of 3 men killed today by Israeli forces during a raid in the West Bank. Occupation forces said its troops raided a home in the Jenin refugee camp where they killed wanted Hamas activist Hamza Abu al-Hija after he allegedly opened fire on them. His house was badly damaged in the raid and 2 of his sons were wounded. A military spokesman called Abu al-Hija a ticking bomb involved in previous attacks and was plotting additional shootings. 2 other men, one from the Islamic Jihad and the other from Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade, were killed as they confronted the troops and attacked their vehicles with petrol bombs and rocks. According to Jenin Hospital, at least 15 people were injured in the clashes. The killing of the 3 Palestinian men in Jenin triggered protests in Jerusalem that led to scuffles between Palestinian youth and occupation forces. Protesters holding Palestinian flags chanted against the occupation at Damascus Gate in Jerusalem's Old City. Israeli forces retaliated with stun grenades and dispersal means and arrested around 8 activists. And in the West Bank city of Ramallah, Palestinians took to the street in a show of anger against the killing of the 3 Palestinians in Jenin.
What happened in Jenin expresses the Zionism ethics. What happened in Jenin expresses the feeling of each Zionist in this land, but we say to them that the blood of the martyrs in Jenin will not go in vain.
In Syria, and after a 3-month siege by the rebels, an army officer declared that government forces were now in control of the western half of Hims province. Syrian soldiers raised the national flag on the battlements of Crac des Chevaliers, a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Securing the area follows fierce battles between government forces and opposition groups and serves two aims: cutting rebel supply routes from Lebanon, which borders Homs, and securing a highway that connects the capital to the coast. One officer said the rebels there were foreign extremists from different countries. Elsewhere in the country and in Daraa, a video uploaded on the internet showed rebels firing at government forces at the Sawami checkpoint on the outskirts of the city. And in Latakia, clashes intensified between rebel soldiers and government forces near the town of Kassab on the border with Turkey. A Cairo court adjourned the trial of ousted Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak until Tuesday the 25th, after Egypt's public prosecution revealed new evidence in the case. Mubarak faces charges related to the killing of protesters in the 2011 revolution, which eventually toppled him. He appeared in the courtroom cell with his two sons Ala and Jamal on his side, both facing corruption charges. Former Prime Minister Habib al-Adli also appeared in the court and faces, along with 6 of his senior aides, charges of giving orders to kill anti-government protesters. A Yemeni soldier and 2 Houthi tribal fighters were killed in renewed clashes in the northern province of Amran. Elsewhere, tribesmen bombed Yemen's main crude export pipeline, forcing oil flows to be stopped. A group of armed Houthi fighters marched to the city of Amran early today and demanded to be allowed to stage a demonstration, but fighting broke out when the army refused to let them enter the city. Last week, at least 40 people were killed in clashes between Houthis and tribesmen near Sana'a. The German government rejected Russia's statement that the exclusion of Crimea in a mission by the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, the OSCE, to Ukraine is a clear admission by the group that the peninsula now belongs to Russia. Yesterday, Russia agreed with 56 other members of the OSCE to send a 6-month monitoring mission to Ukraine, but said the mission has no mandate in Crimea. A group of OSCE monitors are expected in Ukraine in the coming days to support de-escalation efforts. Here's more.
European security monitors will be coming to Ukraine, but, says Russia, they won't be coming here to Crimea. On the streets of Sevastopol, Ukrainian local police have joined forces with the Russian Black Sea Fleet. A day after Russian President Vladimir Putin put his signature to the annexation of Crimea, things are moving quickly. Russia backed the 56 other member states of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe on Friday in its bid to send a mission to Ukraine. The first monitors of the organization, which aims to avert conflict, were due to arrive over the weekend, but Russia's ambassador to the OSCE issued a note of caution.
We proceed from the assumption that the mandate of mission is absolutely clear, and it proceeds from the geopolitical realities that are existing since today, that Crimea has become a part of Russian Federation.
Among the casualties of the annexation are 6 Ukrainian Navy ships trapped by a Russian blockade of their Black Sea headquarters. An attempt by the crew of one of the ships to break out past 3 scuttled vessels ended in failure on Friday. They abandoned efforts to tow one of the sunken hulks out of the way when Russian snipers showed up. At this checkpoint, Ukrainian border guards said almost 1,000 people had crossed from Crimea into Ukraine since the start of March. The US and European Union have warned of more sanctions against Russia on top of those already imposed in response to the annexation of Crimea. So far, Moscow's laughed them off and retaliated with some of its own in what's become the most serious East-West crisis since the Cold War.
Meanwhile, UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon met in Kiev with Ukrainian Prime Minister Arseniy Yatsenyuk after a visit to Moscow, where he met with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Ban is urging Ukraine and Russia to meet for talks to prevent the crisis between them becoming uncontrollable, as he described it, and spreading beyond the region. The Ukrainian leader insists that his government does not recognize the Crimean referendum, which was followed by Russia's annexation of the region. During talks with the UN chief, chief, he said his country strongly believes the international community will condemn Russia's action and find an appropriate response to invasion into Ukrainian territory. Putin yesterday signed legislation that completed the process of absorbing Crimea into Russia. Ban in his statement expressed support for the people of Ukraine.
And Ukrainian people have just gone through a trauma that no country should experience. I'm here to show my solidarity to the people and government of Ukraine at this time of the challenge.
3 weeks today since the Malaysian airliner went missing. China said it had a new satellite image of what could be wreckage from the airliner as more planes and ships headed to join an international search operation scouring some of the remotest seas on Earth. The new potential sighting was dramatically announced by Malaysia's acting transport minister. But for families of the passengers, the process has proved to be an emotionally wrenching battle to elicit information. They lambasted the Malaysian government for concealing the truth. Here are the details.
Families of some of the Chinese passengers aboard missing flight MH370 have gathered together in Beijing to wait for news. On Saturday, their frustration spilled over again into an angry backlash against Malaysian officials, who they believe have mishandled the search.
We want to know what happened, what the reality is. We not here only listen to you. We want to ask you.
The Malaysian officials left the briefing without answering any questions. The angry relatives believe the Malaysian government is covering up information about the fate of the plane and its 239 passengers and crew, and delaying recalibration of the search. Malaysia's transport minister said on Saturday that China now had more satellite images from the southern Indian Ocean.
The news that I just received is that the Chinese ambassador received satellite image of floating objects in the southern corridor, and they will be sending ships to verify.
This is the latest Chinese satellite image that could provide a lead. As with other such images, there's nothing yet to say that what it shows is linked to the missing plane. The search planes returned to an Air Force base near Perth on Saturday at the end of another long day. They start again on Sunday with little to go on but hope as the hunt for flight MH370 enters its third week.
Executives of several large U.S. internet companies, including Facebook and Google, met with U.S. President Barack Obama to discuss their concerns over government surveillance programs. In a statement, the White House said the president sought to provide reassurances that the administration is putting in place reforms to intelligence collection after revelations of widespread collection of data stirred outrage. But Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg, known to be a public critic of government data gathering practices, said while the U.S. government has taken helpful steps to reform its surveillance practices, these are simply not enough. Obama in January outlined a series of limited reforms to National Security Agency NSA data gathering, banning eavesdropping on the leaders of friendly or allied nations, and proposing some changes to how NSA treats Americans' phone data. Now imagine being told by doctors that there was a 10% increased chance you would give birth to twins, and at delivery, quintuplets came out. That is 5 babies. This is what happened to a mother in Dallas, Texas. Mia, Tessa, Brant, Gracie, and Riley were born at 29 weeks through a C-section with the help of about 24 medical staff. Their weights tipped the scales from 1.105 kilograms to 1.5 kilos. Doctors say most of the 5 babies were breathing on their own and are all being fed their mother's milk through feeding tubes. The quintuplets will remain in hospital for 6 to 7 weeks before they can go home and meet their 2-year-old big brother. While the El Clasico has always been a show-off between Barcelona's Lionel Messi and his Real Madrid rival Cristiano Ronaldo, Real Madrid coach Carlo Ancelotti is taking tomorrow's El Clasico personally, saying it was time for him to record a victory over Barcelona. With 10 games left in the La Liga, Real have a 3-point lead over second-place City rivals Atletico Madrid. Champions Barca are a point further back in third, and a defeat tomorrow would severely damage their chances of winning a fifth La Liga title in 6 years. Barca coach Gerardo Martino knows that a victory for his team at the Bernabeu tomorrow would bring momentum back in Barcelona's favor. In English football, Chelsea ripped apart Premier League title rivals Arsenal in a 6-0 mauling to ensure Arsene Wenger's 1,000th game turned into a nightmare. Goals from Samuel Eto'o, Andre Schürrle, Eden Hazard, Mohamed Salah, and 2 from Oscar, coupled with the referee's decision to send off Kieran Gibbs, will surely not be forgotten. Chelsea boss Jose Mourinho extended his unbeaten record to 11 games, and the league leaders moved 7 points clear of third-place Arsenal, having played a game more. Liverpool are in second place. And finally, relatively cold and partly cloudy weather continues tonight with northeasterly moderate winds. Tomorrow, a further rise in temperature is expected, creating warm weather conditions in most regions. But in the evening, partly cloudy skies are in the forecast with possible light rain, mainly in the southern and eastern parts of the kingdom. Winds will be southeasterly moderate to fresh, stirring dust in the desert areas. The Gulf of Aqaba should expect fair conditions tonight, but relatively hot tomorrow with northerly moderate winds and slightly high seas. Here's a look at temperatures forecast for tonight and tomorrow. And to close, a reminder of the day's top stories. King Abdullah speaks with Ghassan Sharbil of the London-based Al Hayat newspaper about a host of challenges facing the Arab world, saying the Kuwait Arab Summit this week is timely to mobilize international cooperation. Israeli forces shoot dead 3 Palestinians in a raid on a home in Jenin to capture an allegedly wanted man, triggering demonstrations in Jerusalem and the West Bank. And the first OSCE monitors, consisting of hundreds of personnel, are due to arrive in Ukraine to support de-escalation efforts. And with this, we come to the end of this edition of the news. I'm Ali Tuqan. Thank you for joining us and have a good night.